Worms, my name is Hilja and welcome to my channel. First and foremost, I would like to address the fact that I have got a new camera, but I haven't had a chance to really test it out or mess around with the settings. So if it looks or sounds bad, I'm terribly sorry. I'll try to figure out the best setup for next week. But hopefully it sounds alright. But to get on topic, if all goes according to plan, this should be uploaded on Friday the 13th, the spookiest day of the spookiest month. How exciting! And in honor of that, I thought I would talk about some spooky books. Now, I actually don't read that much horror / spooky stuff, but I managed to find a list of 10 books that I feel like all of them are definitely not horror. I feel like this ranges from pretty cutesy stuff to some thrillers, like murder mysteries, and some horror, and it's a big variety of different types of things. Because horror or spooky books, that's a genre that I'm personally trying to get more into recently, so I haven't actually read that many books in that genre. I have a lot of books on my shelves that I'm like, oh, I've heard this is so good, but I don't feel good putting in a recommendation video because I haven't read it myself. So I'm hoping that these 10 books are still gonna be, worthwhile for this spooky season. I'm gonna be starting off with the tamest from this entire list, which is Mooncakes. I actually recommended this in my last video where I talked about cozy books, so this is definitely on the very low end of spooky. This has witches and werewolves and queer relationships, and it's just the perfect autumn read. It's really wholesome, but it's got a little hint of spookiness. It's also a graphic novel. If you like those, then highly recommend this one. Next up we have Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. Aidan Thomas is one of my favorite authors. I love Cemetery Boys, and I also loved the Sunbearer Trials. This is also more on the wholesome side. This does deal with ghosts. So the premise of this is that there's this boy, Yadriel, and he's a trans guy, and his family isn't really accepting of his transness. They don't see him as a true brujo, because he was born female, so he can't... Stupid transphobic bullcrap if you ask me. So he wants to summon a ghost in order to prove to his family that he actually is a brujo and he can summon ghosts. So he intends to summon one of his relatives' spirits, but he actually ends up summoning the wrong ghost. So this is it deals with ghosts and sort of more paranormal stuff. It's still really wholesome, but it's spooky, but it's amazingly queer, and this is one of my favorite books. I definitely recommend this one. Continuing on with the ghosts and the paranormal, I guess most of these are paranormal, but is 16 Souls. This was released last year, I believe, and it is the epitome of spooky book. This is the book that it's meant for the spooky season. This is a YA story about this boy named Charlie. This has amazing disability representation and queer representation as well. Pretty much all of these have some sort of queer representation. That should be almost a given. Not every book, but almost every book. But anyway, this boy Charlie, he is a seer, which means that he can see ghosts. And usually he tries to sort of ignore it because he's not really into that. He's a little bit annoyed with it. He does have some ghost friends and all, but mostly he kind of views it as an inconvenience almost. But then he finds out that some of these ghosts that he's gotten used to, seeing around town, some of them are going missing. And there's this big mystery of what's happening to these ghosts, why are they going missing, and it's a really good spooky book. I know that the sequel to this book is either out or it's coming out very soon. I'm definitely intrigued to read that one sometime soon as well. Next up we have Gideon the Ninth, which is... This book series is hard to explain. I feel the whole vibe of this series is I don't know what's going on, but I'm here for the ride. I haven't actually read past the first book, and I've heard that the rest of the books are even more confusing, and I'm like, help. But the premise of this book is that there are lesbian necromancers in space. This is one of the books that I was like kind of on the fence on if I should include it in the list or not, because like when I think of the spooky season books, this one doesn't immediately jump to mind for me. But I feel like because it does deal with like necromancy and that kind of spooky stuff, and it is sometimes classified as horror, I believe. So I think it does still fit the list. If you're in for some weird vibes, then you might like this one. Zombabe is a horror YA book with zombies and queer found family. And it also has kind of It vibes in a way. It's like this small town and there's like the big evil, and I don't know, I was just like, this is the book that like really was like, that got me like, maybe I want to get more into horror, because when I was reading this book I was like so amazed. Actually to the point that I read this as an ebook and I liked it so much that I wanted to get a physical copy of it. So I did, and I think it is criminally underrated. I've seen this talked on BookTube or Book Talk like once, I believe. So like more people need to get on this right now. Read it. I'm not even usually like a zombie person. I don't watch or interact with a lot of zombie media, but this one is so good. Please. If you need a better synopsis than me just screaming, please read it. Basically, it talks about this boy who dies and his best friend resurrects him, but the side effect of his resurrection is that he has a hunger for human flesh now. So, oopsie. This is probably like a big outlier in this list, but The Blood Road, or honestly like any book in this Logan McCrae series by Stuart McBride. This is my all-time favorite like murder mystery series. It takes place in Scotland, that talks about this character Logan McCrae who works in the police station. I know, ACAB, but I still like to read. I think all of them can be read as standalones, so honestly like if you look at them, just pick whichever one catches your interest out of those. These always are just like so thrilling and so fast-paced, and I'm just like, I love them. And also in most of these books, I'm pretty sure not in the first one, but in the majority of the books, there's also a side character that is a lesbian. So that's amazing, because you rarely see that in like these types of adult gritty detective novels. But yeah, honestly, if you want to get more into that genre, I think this is a good read. I used to read a lot more of those, because when I buy English books in Finnish bookstores, the main selection is either these kind of mystery detective books or they're adult romances, so that's why I kind of have some of these that I've read, and majority of them I felt kind of neutral about, but this series has really just like stuck out to me as a really good one. Next up we have House of Hollow. This is a pretty short book, so if you don't have like a lot of time to read a really big horror book, then this one might be worth your time. It's about this group of 3 sisters who as kids went missing, I think, and then they're found in the middle of the street and they don't remember what happened to them, but whatever did happen to them deeply changed them. And this is about sort of these girls figuring out what actually happened to them these many years ago. I think this book is just like so atmospheric and like vibes and like creepy. I don't want to talk too much about it because it is pretty short, so I don't want to give anything away, but this one is pretty good, and I think the main character is bisexual. Then we have My Dear Henry. Basically this is a Jekyll and Hyde retelling, but make it gay and make it black. And it's about these 2 boys who fall in love. It takes place in the 1800s in London, so there's a lot of bigotry, like racism and homophobia, that's being thrown against these boys. Obviously, since like it is a retelling, you kind of almost know the twist, but it's still pretty creepy and you're kind of like wondering what's going to happen. This is written by Calin Bayron, who's written some other pretty popular books, so I'm actually surprised that this one isn't really talked about that much, or at least I myself haven't heard it talked about. If you enjoyed This Poison Heart or Cinderella's Dead Now and want more from the author, then I'd recommend checking this one out. Then we have Ace of Spades. This is another book that I don't really want to give anything away. It tells about these two black kids who are in this high school that's predominantly white. There's this like mysterious group called the Aces that are targeting these two characters specifically. And this has like a lot of tension. It's like really fast pace of like what is going on, who is behind this, why is this happening to them, and there's also like talks about race and just like an incredible read. This again is more different from the more like paranormal or spooky stuff, but I still think this is like high stakes, fast paced and that kind of stuff, so I think it's still a pretty good book for this time of year. This is one of my favorite books that I read this year, A Dowry of Blood. This is a really poetic and like atmospheric book that's a retelling of Dracula's brides. This is written from the point of view of Constanta, who was one of Dracula's brides, and it talks about her relationship with Dracula and also her relationship with Dracula's other brides. Brides is gender neutral in this case. And it's like really queer and it has polyamory and it has vampires and it's really poetic, but in a way that's easy to read. A lot of the times if language is like really flowery, it can be hard to digest, at least for me. But this is like written really beautifully, but still in a way that just makes sense to my brain. So I don't have to like read over every sentence and analyze it and be like, what does that mean? Some people enjoy that. I am no hate against those kind of books. I myself cannot deal with that. So this was really refreshing in that sort of sense. I ate this book up. If you're into more darker books, then I cannot recommend this highly enough. And those were my 10 books that I would recommend for this spooky season. Again, some of these maybe wouldn't necessarily be categorized as spooky books, but as I mentioned, I'm only getting into the genre, so I actually don't have that many spooky books, but I tried to substitute with some that are like spooky adjacent. Feel free to let me know in the comments down below what some of your favorite spooky books are, if you've read any of the books I've recommended, and how you're feeling about Halloween coming up in general. That was it for this video. If you liked it, please give it a big thumbs up, and I hope to see you again very soon!